All right, so basically we're gonna try this again. Yeah, so I got into a little situation. I had to pull over. Need some gas. So basically, I'm just gonna keep it, simple when it come down to all this. The crazy part with people with your time and energy, literally a lot of people take your time for granted, you know, especially the energy and all with that as well. Crazy part, I actually, hold on. So, my bad. People be calling. I mean, the crazy part is, you know, for instance, a lot of people always want to deal with you in a certain type of way in which they want to try to take your time for granted. I mean, the crazy part, man, I literally, when I would drop my kids off from school, it's not a day go by to where everybody knows you have to get in the carpool lane or wherever, stay in that line. But to a degree, every single time, there's always one person that literally wants to jump the line. And every time when I catch them, I cut them off to where they can't get up there. So, you know, in response, they pretty much looking crazy because they can't get past me and they get the cussing and everything else. You know, I don't care if it's a dude or a female. They come, they cut their eyes at me and all that, but it is what it is. If I gotta stand in line, you gotta stand in line as well. You know, far as with business, too, when I conduct business, I deal with people on the business level. A lot of people, you know, have issue with prices in which, sometimes they just don't want to pay it. And my understanding is this: if a person is too high, don't deal with it. If a person is too cheap, you got to ask why. Because rationally, you always want to get the cheaper deal, but at what cost? You know, because the value is relatively low, which helps your pocket, but is it in a timely manner? Are they guarantee you a time in which things will be delivered or things will be taken care of, or you know, throughout? And that's the issue that a lot of people, have in reference to, valuing someone else's time. The energy in which they do the work. Most people want to put a tag on which they feel they believe. I always talk about people with feelings. You got to get out your feelings when it comes to this. Using rational decisions to where if you don't value certain people's time, you know, don't use their energy and put forth the effort to act like you're going to deal or work with this person and then just shut them down. Prime example, I've come across a lot of people, you know, even in construction and all that. I do a lot of little side jobs, and there was a man who, um, honestly, in my opinion, the guy who did the work should have, laid out the price beforehand, and he didn't. So there was a, disagreement about the price being a little bit too high for doing the work. Honestly, I was a little bit on the person's side about that, but you know, when it came down to it, That should have been your mission to ask the price before someone got started doing the work. Even coming to the situation to where, another situation where a guy was doing a remodel in a bathroom. They agreed on one price, but when the guy got finished, they wanted to pay another. And to the extent, the guy took a hammer, started busting up all the tile, bust the mirror, broke the sink, and the customers were just outrageous, like, literally. And halfway into the guy doing the stuff, she agreed to pay that money. But then that would have took more time and energy to fix it. Well, who's going to pay for the refix? So he rather just broke everything and just left. I mean, the bathroom was literally destroyed. And it came at that point to where her trying to rationalize his time and energy was worth her having to hire another contractor to do the work. Even though that contractor labor did all the work, he rather seen a demolish, demolish, literally, um, bathroom versus just walking away and what he had. Because a lot of people don't value people's time and energy. To an artist, they get offended when some people, criticize their work to a degree. I mean, it's a level of criticism in everything that you do. Even as a comedian, I've seen this going all the time. You know, a level of respect for comedians in their jokes, and a level of disrespect to where you get heckled. Comedians get heckled. And, it comes down to a point respecting the craft. If you don't like the guy's jokes, then just don't laugh. You know, let it be what it be. You know, heckling a comedian most of the time is never good because honestly, they do it for a living. They know how to hit it where it hurts. There was one guy I seen, he didn't respect the guy's time and energy. He was heckling the comedian to the point where the comedian just, well, actually, to be honest, it was his girl that was heckling the comedian. And she was heckling all the comedians all night till it actually came up to this last comedian. And the last comedian wasn't having it, so he was prepared. Soon as she said one thing out of the way, he went in on her. Went in on a man, had her so mad that she actually went to the bathroom and he kept going in on the guy. Kept talking about how this woman didn't look so good. And the guy was saying that he'll beat him up. And it came to the point where the comedian told him, I tell jokes for a living, but remember, I still live in these streets. To the issue where the guy wanted to fight the comedian and got knocked out. You know, and respecting, like I said, people time and energy is certain levels to it in which a lot of people don't do. You know, it's a craft. Like I said about the guy busting up the bathroom. That's his profession. That's his craft. He takes pride and energy in doing his work. You know, to the degree there are a lot of people that don't put no energy in what they do. That's why you have a whole bunch of messy jobs and literally have to sue contractors and have to get things redone. Or, you have an artist that do some work, didn't put too much energy in it because he was having a bad day or something like that. He normally do great work. But that energy is something, putting in the time, you might say, well, you're taking too long on a project, but then when you see the end result, you're amazed by it. you know. So time and energy is heavy, in which a lot of people don't value to the degree most people time and energy, you know. But there is something to a level of respect. If you say you're gonna do something at a certain time, most people hold you to it. You know, when the job needs to be done, the job needs to be done. And a lot of people don't have an understanding of valuing that time and energy to the point where it's precious, you know. And I was talking to my cousin, he was looking at anime, and he was basically explaining a parable that a anime was talking about, that the greater the loss, the greater the reward, you know. And I laughed because I was talking about this in the space before, throughout YouTube, saying that, to a degree, I took a lot of L's as far as relationships, to the point where, there were some women that probably didn't talk to me, and there were some women that did talk to me, but the relationship just didn't work out. But overall, me being married was the greatest victory that I got out of taking the L's. And, it was a lot of time and energy going into relationships, and that's the key thing, in which, a lot of people have to have an understanding and valuing people's time and energy, you know. But I always try to give a little tidbits when it comes to money. I always, tell people to get their life insurance together, you know, try to figure out what's best for you. But mainly, I always say go with a whole life, preferably a universal life, because it gives more of a rate per month, anywhere from 5 to 7% interest a month on your money. You can't beat that, you know. And so, going into the matters of having kids and not having kids, creating some type of generational wealth. That's the key. Having an understanding. If you're living, you got to be living to live. Knowledge yourself. I always talk about this, and I tell men and women this: know who you are. If you don't know who you are, you're just a lost person walking in the wilderness, literally walking in the wilderness. You have to figure out who you are and what you want to do. To the premise of a lot of people having an understanding who they are keeps them from, you know, being in the fire so much. Not to go down that path, because that's a path of destruction. It relates to the time and energy. If your time and energy is precious, you tend not to take too many L's versus more victories than L's, because you calculate your moves before you do them. You figure things out. You have an understanding that your life is your life. And when it comes to your life, you want your life to be at its best and to be at its whole, you know. And to the degree, a lot of people are talking about relationships right now. That's like one of the biggest things, or the biggest topics, throughout YouTube and across the states and the world. And, there's a trend going up and down in relationships, and it relates to the time and energy, you know. Like I told my wife when I actually got married, I don't want to get married again. You know, I dread not to, but if it happens, it happens. But I let her know to have an understanding. I want to be married forever, you know. So I'm not gonna marry you with the premise of getting divorced 10 years later, you know. And I'm not gonna marry just any woman just to be marrying her because of her looks. The vanity is something that a lot of men and women go through. Women like men who dress nice, but the man can dress nice and live in a cardboard box. You know, the suits versus whatever that the guys are talking about. A man can wear a nice suit and, you know, live in a cardboard box. I mean, it's all about the appearance. You can drive a real nice car, but be in financial debt. So when it comes down to it, having an understanding what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you move is the key. So Basically, when it comes down to it, a lot of people got to have that understanding. You get into a relationship, and I had this discussion Sunday that finance is a big decision. You know, yeah, I agree with you as well. Not having enough time and energy for the marriage. I've also been married for actually 14 going on 15 years. I actually skipped a year because of the me and my wife met, but it's actually we got married '07. Yeah. So for the most part, you know, me and my wife we talked about a lot of stuff, even with our finances. That's why I was talking about Sunday that she wasn't invested in her 401k. I was like, well, why not? What are you doing? She didn't know anything about it, And I always say this when it comes to marriage, there's no rule book on marriage. There's no play to where you get the proper marriage and get it done the right way the first time. There's no rule book on it. Just like there's no rule book on, being a man and being a woman. There are certain criteria that you can, do. You can actually be a woman by the way you carry yourself. You can be a man by the way you carry yourself. But the influence is the key. You know, they would always say that when you turn a certain age, that what makes you grow. And to the elders, they come with a lot of parables. Say just because you get a little hair on your face, that doesn't actually make you grown. You know, and that be the funny thing. You know, when it come down to it, a lot of people fail to realize that. You know, and I always talk about it because I didn't time you're 18 to 21, 18 to buy a pack of cigarettes and 21 to drink a beer. That was supposedly going down the lines of legal age, and 25, your insurance goes down. You know, age doesn't give a level of maturity. You know, I talk to my older kids all the time, letting them know that. You know, and when it comes down to it, you know, you have to understand these things by going through the motions. You know, back in the day, there were a lot of young parents. They never got it right with the first child. By the time the second and third child come, they were so structured because they went through the woes. You know, having parents in your life that guide you helps, but without those parents giving you that extra push, you know, kind of walk, like I said, through the wilderness for a minute until you actually get a level of somewhat of understanding and, compassion towards others that, give you some influence. When it comes down to it, nobody gets it right on the first try. You know, there are a lot of pitfalls in relationships until you weather the storm. And most people weather the storms more than usual because, like I said, it's a decline in marriage due to the actual structure. There's no literal structure anymore when it comes to the marriage due to, the elders not passing out the advice. And to the degree, you have elders that give the advice, but then the youth don't want to take it. So it's a push between the two. You know, you have a lot of elders that give great advice. Then you have most of the elders that give the worst advice. And it's only from a premise of what they learn, what they know. I can only teach you how to become a banker if I'm in the field and I'm well endowed in that area. Other than that, I'm only teaching you off self knowledge. And if I don't know anything, how good is that? Honestly. So we have to have a level of understanding that teaching our kids something, if we can't do it, we have to take them to someone else. You know, Rael gave a great uh, story talking about his friend, and I've heard this story before. How when it came down to it, his friend, um, I guess the friend was talking with his dad, and his dad had a work mindset to the point where you work, have a good job, pay your bills, and be a productive citizen. While the friend's dad, his next door neighbor or something, was talking with his son and telling him that he owned his own business and stuff. And when it came down to it, his dad had a lack of understanding because if anything happens or your customers didn't come, you don't make any money. But to the degree the guy was well what he did to where he owned a hotel in Hawaii. He had a couple of houses, sold them all, went and bought a hotel in Hawaii. Right? That was one of the best things that, kind of worked out in his favor. And a lot of people don't have that understanding in which, if you're a worker bee, you're going into the environment working and doing certain things. As a result, you have that mindset into doing that, only that. But, you know, over time, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you actually have to go into that field with someone who's well endowed in it. You know, that's like a carpenter trying to be a plumber. He might can cut some wood and put pipes through it, but actually connecting, gluing, it's common, but at what cost? Not doing it properly could cost you a lot of money. It's like an electrician dealing with water. Water and that energy don't mix. You know, so therefore you have to take the time in doing the research and learning. You know, I've said this one time before. I'm actually about to get ready to get off too. About to get ready to go holler at the professor and see what he's talking about. Today is Tuesday, but when it comes down to it, you can take all the time studying, but if you never put whatever you study into action, what good is it? I can tell you how to change a tire, but me not changing that tire, you don't know the woes of breaking the bolts before you actually change that tire. You know, breaking those bolts before you change a tire is usually taking a lot of energy and time and strength, in which most people, if you don't know how to do it, I mean, it's one thing to read it in a book. It's one thing to look at a video about it and constantly say, I know what to do, but how to do is the key. Stepping on that tire iron just to turn that bolt, knowing the proper way of doing it to where you won't break that bolt. Some people be doing it the wrong way. You know, what's the old saying? Tighty righty, lefty loosey. You know, if you turning it right and tighten it and stepping on it, you're gonna break that bolt. But you're putting all your weight and pressure on that bolt. So whereas, over time, if that's an old car, that bolt has literally had its day. But you're forcing it in the opposite direction to the degree, what do you think is gonna happen? You know? So at the end, like I say, you know, value your time, value your energy. That's what's precious to a lot of people, and you gotta value it. You literally have to value it. So, you know, like I said, I'm about to get ready to slide over the Gold Professor channel, see what he's talking about over there. Tuesdays, you know, he's done changed it up. His Tuesdays are mainly about traveling, but I'm gonna go see what he's talking about. But like I said, until next time, Like always, we here and we gonna